You've tuned into Invisi Youth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Invisi Youth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, empowerment-building, fun life hacks and motivation tips for all of the medically adultish people in life. I'm your host, Dominique Vale, and today's episode 13 and another episode in our new segment called So We're Gonna Get Talking About Taboo Topics. In today's episode, we are focusing on one of the biggest topics that's in mainstream media over the past 5 years, body positivity. So this seems to be with media, school campaigns, actors and musicians. Everyone seems to be trying to show their ways of being body confident and promoting that body positivity. But what a lot of people don't do is get into really the nitty-gritty of how to build up that body confidence, and especially what would be the steps to gain that level of confidence when you're living with a chronic illness or a disability as a young adult. So today's episode, we're going to build the masterclass of giving motivation, some kick-ass life tips, and joyful daily mantras. The secrets of body positivity that every young adult would need are going to be revealed here. And I'm so excited for our guest expert today. She's someone that I'm personally a very big fan of, and I'm pretty sure I've made my entire team a very big fan of her as well by having them watch all of her different speaking engagement, TV appearances, and her Instagram posts, which are legendary. She will leave her handle at the end, so you guys will all need to follow her. This is British motivational speaker and burn survivor Catrin Pugh. She is a young woman that's filled with joy and talent and is a force of nature for the entire physical difference and disability community. 5 years ago, Catrin had survived an Alps coach crash, which resulted in having 96% burns on her body and other health struggles like vision impairments. Catrin now works as an ambassador for diversity and body positivity with charities such as the Katie Piper Foundation and Changing Faces. And this year, she's not only started her university studies for physiotherapy, but she's also been part of the Behind the Scars campaign, which has celebrated scars and bringing confidence to those who live with traumas that have affected their health and body. So I want everyone to welcome Catrin to the show. Catrin, how are you?
I'm really good. Nice to see you again.
Yes. I'm so excited to have you on and get to learn all of your mega expert tips on body positivity and be able to share them with everyone. So we're going to be able to put Catrin right in the hot seat from the beginning and play a game which is inspired by the fun dating app. This is Lifestyle Tinder.
Life Tinder Challenge. Swipe right.
Actually, guys, it's called Life Tinder Challenge. I forgot my show's own title, so that's why that's different. This is one of my favorite segments to play with our guests because it's a combination of humor and informative chat. We let our guests swipe left for no and swipe right for yes on things that are all body positivity related, and they're going to tell us why they would say a heck yes or a no way. So, Catrin, the first one we're going to be looking at would be like modeling campaigns. Like currently we see a lot all over Instagram with the Victoria's Secret fashion show and a lot of other clothing campaigns. What do you think of that?
So I'm an avid Tinder user, actually, Dominique. So I know that swipe right is yes, swipe left is no.
There we go.
So I would swipe right for clothing campaigns as long as they are inclusive, which a lot more brands are starting to do. I mean, obviously Victoria's Secret have a very particular look, which is, I mean, it's unattainable for anyone, like never mind whether you've got any kind of disability or illness. So, like I swipe right on clothing campaigns, but maybe not on Victoria's Secret, but things like Rihanna's line that she did, the amount of diversity she had in that line.
It's 19 hours.
Was, sorry, that's my talking laptop there. The amount of diversity she had in that line was amazing, and to have her, who's such a highly thought of celebrity and singer and things, be willing to have people of all shapes, sizes, color, race, body differences, people in wheelchairs, it's a step in the right direction. So it's a swipe right for me personally, just because I think that many of them are changing and becoming more diverse, but obviously we've still got a long way to go, and especially the modeling industry in general is still very clothes that best on one certain type, which is a bit ridiculous because no one has the same type of body. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. Hopefully things will carry on changing though.
Yes, hopefully. And I, from a personal side note, would love to see a model that is around my 5'1" stature. That would be great.
Yeah.
So what about sort of these, the whole debate on women being glammed up versus all natural, that beauty debate that you have to kind of pick one or the other?
Okay, so again, swipe right. Oh, I find the positives and everything, so I'm always like swipe right, but um, so I'm very much someone that loves being very natural. I
Mhm.
have never really enjoyed like wearing lots of makeup. And when I got my scars when I was 19, that didn't really change. Although lots of people used to say to me, "Oh, well, you could cover that up with makeup, couldn't you?" And I think that's not really, the point. I've
Yeah.
always loved to have sort of fresh face, natural look.
Yeah.
So I don't see why that would change just because I have scars on my face. However, sometimes I grew up doing performing arts. I grew up on the stage, and sometimes I did used to love glamming up. So I personally don't think that anyone has to choose. And I also think that if you find something like makeup or skin camouflage, which is like a medically applied makeup that can
Oh.
cover any kind of skin condition, we actually have it on prescription over here in the UK.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. And if you feel you need to use it, then that makes you no better or any worse than me for not using it?
Yeah.
And sometimes I use my skin camouflage and I do use makeup occasionally on days where I want to step out the house and maybe I do want to cover up my scars a little bit that day, which is nothing to be ashamed of, I
Yeah.
don't think. So yeah, swipe right on both. I think the fact that people should choose is a swipe left, but the fact that both are available is definitely a swipe right.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And then also for you guys listening on our podcast channel, make sure you check out our YouTube channel because for this segment, we have graphics popping up. And also you can see Catrin's beautiful face and myself. So make sure you go over to our YouTube channel as well to watch the show and give that subscribe. So shameless plug on that and we'll go back to the game. So what about the big campaign that's been going around with the hashtag "It's okay to not be okay"?
Again, total swipe right for me.
Yeah.
I think mental health is a very difficult subject in terms of people expressing it. I personally didn't ever used to want to really talk about my mental health because I thought that my physical health was way more important at the time. I didn't actually realize that all of the feelings of like upset and anger that I was having could be named as something like depression or mild anxiety about me going on buses and stuff. And I think a lot of people, some people don't know that that's what they're going through. And the fact that this is all happening now and different disorders and mental health issues are being brought up and talked about a lot more, it's good, it's amazing, and it probably would have been beneficial to me and at that time to see someone else say it's okay not to be okay. So I could have sat there and gone, oh, actually, my mental health isn't okay. Also, with physical health, I'm very much someone that puts on a brave face most days.
Yeah.
And I think, especially when you've got that ethic and that personality inside of you of being busy and wanting to always keep going, it can be quite hard to sit down and say, oh, actually, you know what, I need a break.
Yeah.
So I do think it's helping to sort of help with things like that as well. And I've began to learn that I need to slow down occasionally if I want my health to continue to be good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think any kind of hashtag that is promoting your own mental and physical well-being is a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you kind of point that out too, that it was a lot of your focus was on the physical health because we'll see that with the charity as people and even the medical community want young people to focus on their physical health and just assume that if you get to a recovery or a stability level that your mental health will just fall into place and check, and most of the time that's not the case. So it's definitely, I've appreciated it, having the charity focus on physical and mental health, being able to see campaigns like that, and then encouraging the young people we work with who have illnesses or disabilities to talk about their mental wellness as well, because like you said, it does go hand in hand in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, and I do think that idea that once you reach a certain point of physicality, that your mental health will, I don't know, get back to normal,
Yeah.
or whatever normal is thought of in air quotes. Um, but yeah, it's unachievable, and I do think that people need to know that it's okay to be physically well and not mentally well, or to be mentally well and physically unwell. Because
Yeah.
I also think that sometimes physically I'm not well, but I actually feel okay mentally. So
Yeah.
it's to know that they do go hand in hand, and campaigns like that and other campaigns, they do really promote that, which is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. So our last Tinder one with you is going to be hearing the phrase "it could always be worse" from family and friends.
Oh, I've had this one so many times.
Oh, all the
You know
time.
what though? Sometimes I catch myself doing it to myself, and I mean, you know what? I again swipe right. Like I always try and find the positive. And generally, people that say it that are family and friends, they aren't being malicious. They're
Hmm.
not being horrible people. They genuinely think that that comment is going to make you feel better. So, I mean, you've kind of got to take comments from friends and family with a pinch of salt, I think, and
Yes.
just sit there and think before you react.
Hmm.
Just think they don't mean it that way. And I often, if something like that happens, I'm just like, I understand that that's a comment that you want to say, but let me explain why I don't like it.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, like other things. One of the worst ones for me is, oh, but you're still beautiful, aren't you? And
Oh
putting the
my god.
still in front of beautiful really ruins
I know.
it.
Can I just get the compliment?
Yeah, I know, that's all I want. But no, like, I think obviously it can be difficult for people. A lot of people don't know what to say, especially if they themselves have not been through something medically. So I try and always, give that person the benefit of the doubt, but trying to explain why that comment isn't suitable so that then they won't say that to the
Yeah.
next person is a good way of sort of dealing with it. I found,
Yeah.
and to be fair, my family and friends are good now. They won't say it, but it has definitely happened in the past. And when strangers do it,
Mm.
it's it can be a little bit worse. Obviously, going, oh well, it could be worse. But it's the same kind of thing, just kind of making them aware of why that's not okay. But I always think it's better to teach someone the right way so that then that they won't go on and pay that forward and do it again, because I'm strong enough to handle that comment. The next person might not be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of it is, too, what I'll say to a lot of the young adults at InvisiYouth is struggle is subjective to people. So a lot of times, especially in my own experience with family and friends, they won't, because they know I deal with chronic illness and it affects my physical health, they never like to complain in front of me, even if
So
it's like a dramatic issue that I would struggle with if it was in my life. They always feel that because I have chronic illness, they never want to complain to me. So if they ever bring up comments like, oh, it could be worse, it all of a sudden has like the deer in headlights panic look on their face because they think they've
yeah,
just traumatized me. So I always say, well, like struggle is subjective. What is a traumatic event for you? Obviously, in the scale in which I've had to struggle and have had trauma is very different from yours. But in your scale, it does matter a lot more. So I said you kind of have to, with friends that are especially that are healthy or able-bodied, you have to kind of allow them to complain on certain elements or
yeah,
make comments, but then explain why to you you wouldn't rationalize it as such a big issue.
yeah. And I think that's the important thing. Like, you should be able to say whatever you want to friends and family anyway. And so the fact that they get told that that's not okay for you, it should just be like, oh gosh, right, okay, I won't say that again then. And it's having that comfortableness, that comfort to be able to just say that to them, which is the luxury of having friends and family around.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can literally say whatever you want, and like my sister, she can do and say whatever she wants, and she has, and I still love her to bits. So yeah, just being confident enough to sort of explain and teach people. That's what I always say is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And another way we're going to have you get to teach some people is talking about some of the highlights of your life. So we're going to jump into our next segment called Illest Superlatives.
Illest superlatives in this youth.
All right, guys, with Ill is Superlatives, this is where we get to talk about living with illness and disability and going through some of the best and highlights. So in the States, it would be the yearbook of Catrin's life and what would be her best moments, whether it's empowering or ignorant or humorous. We're going to go through some highlights. So, Catrin, what has been probably one of the best compliments that you've been given or have given out to somebody else?
I mean, one of the compliments I always love getting is generally I don't enjoy compliments that are to do with my physical features, and I don't mean that in a way that I think I'd get them all the time or anything. I just mean I think it means more if it's something more meaningful. So people just being like, "You got this," or "You're doing amazing," and just generally in life. That is one of the compliments that I love to have, because especially with my particular, the burns, I've ended up with visual impairments, I've ended up with neurological issues, and obviously the actual scarring, which is very visible. And sometimes I do sit around and just think, like, am I doing life the way I should be doing life at the moment? And especially as a young person, and I'm living in a city now, I live in London, and I feel like I'm supposed to have this grand life, and I'm not going out sometimes because my feet hurt, or I'm, not going out in the cold too much because it makes my hands really numb, or, I feel like I'm not doing all the things I should be doing. So when I have someone like a friend or a university person I've just met say, "Wow, you're doing so amazing in life," it makes a real difference. So, I mean, the best compliments to me are just saying how, that you've got this, you're doing well, and to keep going, and all of that sort of encompassed in one thing is always really motivating to me, and it always makes me feel really good. In terms of compliments I give, I mean, those are the compliments I give, because I know how much of a difference it can make. And even my friends that don't have health conditions, saying it to those friends as well. Like, one of my friends at the moment, she's an actress. She's not really making it in terms of what she wants to do. She's not on the West End or Broadway. And just saying to her, like, "You've got this, you're going to get somewhere soon, and you're just killing life." I know it boosts her up. So I think that's sort of global, not just in the health community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even like you mentioned meeting university friends, because I know you're in school now studying physiotherapy. So what has been like a best university moment for you so far?
I think it sounds ridiculous, right? So I obviously went through a traumatic injury that made my whole life change at 19. So I think that in itself is quite difficult, because you're so used to your life as it is, and then it dramatically changes. And then I have the physical features that have changed, and I'm covered in scars, so I look very different. I feel different. And going back into education for me was a really scary thing, because I didn't know how I'd be academically, but the way I am socially has also changed slightly. So I was terrified, and I know it's a global sort of feeling when you go into any new environment. I was terrified that I'd make no friends, and that no one would not that no one would want to be friends with me, but I know that I become slightly more reserved when I'm meeting new people, because I know people are going to want to ask questions. I know that people are going to be curious and maybe not know how to ask questions, and it's just a very difficult situation. So I was terrified. However, probably the best moment for me, a few weeks in, like, I'd got to know a few people, a few girls, a few boys, like, made some friends, but I'd say it was like on an acquaintance level. And then I got invited into this group chat with the group of girls that I kind of got close to, and it's called Girl Gang. And it sounds ridiculous, but the day I was invited into that sort of little chat, I mean, it made me feel like everything that I thought was going to be a big deal actually didn't matter to those people. And often I think you build those things up in your head, and everyone around you actually isn't thinking about any of those things. So, like, they're a really good group of friends now that I've made in my class, and we're doing the Secret Santa this year. I'm going to a fajita night later with them, and it's nice to have a little community, and it's all completely new people who didn't know me before I had the trauma, which also makes a big difference, because you can kind of reinvent yourself. So yeah, that would probably be my best moment of uni. And it sounds ridiculous because it's just
I
so
love it.
acceptance.
Girl gang chat is my favorite.
No, I know, girl gang chat is awful, but no, it's really nice to kind of be accepted and have the scars accepted, and they're not even seen as a thing. Like, it's not even seen as a taboo between that group, which is really nice.
Yeah. And what about for you, like, your favorite public speaking engagement? Because I know you've gotten to do a lot of TV appearances and campaigns, but what has been one that you've really enjoyed being a part of?
So I always enjoy anything that involves young people, obviously. It's great because I'm talking to Invisi Youth.
Hello.
But yeah, so I really enjoy doing young people. I actually got asked to speak at a teenage cancer event, which is
cool.
Yeah, so it's a big, I don't know if they have it in America actually, but in the UK we've got a charity called Teenage Cancer Trust, and I got to speak at their 18 to 25-year-old event, and then at their, I think it's like 14 to 18-year-old event, or maybe 11 or 12, and it was all to do with like what happened to me, how I become motivated, and how to get through any kind of adversity, like no matter what that would be. And for me, that was probably one of the most rewarding for me, because afterwards I had so many people come up to me and tell me how much of a difference I'd made to their outlook. And I do think like sometimes public speaking events can be a bit selfish because you go, and when you have all these people come up to you, it makes you feel amazing, because you kind of stand there and think, I've gone through half an hour of speaking about something really difficult, but look at how many people I've touched, and that makes me feel good. So yeah, like that was amazing. And the best comments for me were things like, a lot of people, when they go through the health conditions, end up with a scar, and that is a visible representation of what they've been through.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't like to show it, which is obviously each to their own. But the fact that I was up there with my scars on show, and I do like proudly bear them, I had people come up to me and tell me that they would be wearing t-shirts to show their scar on their arm, or they would show off their scars from now on. And for me, that's something that is very rewarding, because anyone else that feels comfortable enough to show off their scar is one more person then that will inspire another person.
Yeah.
It will be like a domino effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love doing any kind of charity event. For me is the most rewarding. The TV stuff's fun, but it can be very, I don't know what the word is, contrived. It can be very quick, 3 minutes in, out, get like what they want on the TV done, and then that's it. Whereas at a charity event, you can really talk about what you want to say and have a massive impact, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Teen Cancer Trust they have an American branch, because they were actually the first charity to follow us on Twitter. Shout out to Teen Cancer America for doing that. So we see them pop up on our feed all the time. But I love how you mentioned that you the way that you talk about your scars, and that way people that have sort of a singular one from surgical, or sort of within like the cancer community, having the port scar or PICC line scar, for them it's like one place that they can look at that represents that part of their health journey. So I think it's really wonderful, like you said, that they're able to then sort of hear how you've really sort of gained that body positivity and that body confidence, and they can then, like you said, the domino effect of really then having your words impact their daily action, and then they can have other people when they go back to a hospital for doctor's appointments or other treatments, and then they can, showing their scars sort of in a non-verbal way, can then make other patients feel confident that they can show their scars too. So I think that's really, like what you mentioned, it's very helpful to have that ripple effect.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing of knowing that you're not the only person as well. Like being able to show your scar and see someone else with a scar, it makes you feel like not that you're part of a group, but that you're not on your own, which it always makes a difference with whatever you're going through in life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And going off of that, we sort of explained that Catrin is a motivational speaker. And one thing I like to have for all of our motivational speakers and advocates do is be a part of a different segment we have called Rebel Game Changer Status, which is definitely what Catrin is.
Rebel Game Changer Status.
All right, guys, Rebel Game Changer status, we get to go through a step-by-step guide of becoming your own advocate and activist, what we like to call rebel game changers, who are really all about making waves and impacting in the chronic illness and disability community, and really talking with our guests not only about why it's important to challenge these stigmas, but then giving you guys sort of steps and tips in order to be able to be your own advocate and change the game of what is in the health community. So, Catrin, kind of going off on a more like general question, what for you have been sort of misconceptions you found that society have in terms of ideals on health and beauty?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is actually that if you do look different, that you're going to be sad or upset about that or angry about that, and that you'll have all of these negative thoughts to do with looking different. Personally, I'm extremely happy within my life and everything I do. I think it's hard for me personally because I know what I looked like before and I know what I looked like after.
Yeah.
Which does make it difficult because it's such a stark change. But I've had 5 years to sort of love the new me, and for the beauty industry and the world to think that I would love myself any less because of looking slightly different is absolutely ridiculous to me. And for a lot of people, they are born and grow up with this body or with an illness, and it's part of them, but it's still thought of as being something to be upset about, or that I just find the assumption that you're going to not be happy within your life is probably one of the biggest misconceptions, whether you look different or are different in any way, invisible or visible. As soon as people find out, it's kind of that sympathy of, oh, that must be awful for you. But actually, you know what? My life is probably better now than it would have been had my mum wouldn't agree, but my life is probably better now than it would have been had this not happened. I have a goal in life. I do amazing things. I get to speak in front of people. I'm part of charities. I have done things on television, and it's opportunities I would not have done had this not happened. So for people to assume that I wouldn't enjoy the life I now have is a big misconception that I think I go through, and I've spoken to others and I know that they go through that as well. So I'd enjoy that change, that like the fact that to look different should make you sad is something that I think it really needs to change in society.
Yeah, and even kind of going off of that, I know from myself living with a chronic illness, and especially a lot of young women who have chronic illness, they develop through an injury like myself or they're born with, it's always that like health is the equal asset to beauty, that because they're in quotes not medically healthy at all times, that beauty then sort of has to dwindle because their body is not physically functioning at a normal, in air quotes, way. So that even on my end, if I'm physically not feeling well, then I would get the comments from friends or family saying that, oh, well, you look like you're in a lot of pain, or you look like you're dealing with symptoms, so that it was a physical negative to me if I wasn't healthy. But I'm never going to have perfect health any longer. It's my new normal. As I say, it's been 10 years. Like you said, when you have time to kind of build your own life around the way that your body looks and the way it works for you, that's the biggest misconception, I think, on our end as well, kind of going off of what you said, is that your health and beauty kind of have to be equal, that if your health dwindles, then your beauty does as well, which I think is a big issue and sort of stigma that both of those aspects in society have to improve on.
Yeah, I agreed.
Yeah, even kind of going off of that, what made you in a lot of ways want to kind of challenge that stigma? Because you really, from very early on, from your sort of journey after your trauma, you really did kind of build into that, being an advocate and talking publicly about your scars and everything. So what made you want to challenge that norm very quickly?
I think one of the big things was not seeing anything particularly at that time in the media that was similar to me. Not seeing people bearing their scars, not seeing people talk about having a visual impairment, not seeing people talk about their neurology problems. And, generally as young people in society, you read a magazine or you go on social media to follow people that you either aspire to be like or that you feel is on the same level as you,
Yeah.
And I feel like I had either of that. So although there were a couple around at the time, I felt like I wanted to be that person that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And so the reason I began using Instagram as like a way to sort of show off my scars and things was simply because I know that there might be someone sat in a hospital or sat at home at like a low point looking for someone who would like them, and looking for someone to say, oh wow, there can be a life after something like this happens to you, and to see that it's a good life. And that's really why I began all of this. And then the motivational speaking fit in because I talk a lot anyway.
No.
So it's kind of all just encompassed within itself, and it's all worked out really nicely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then like personal, just like shout out to your Instagram. Your Insta story is always very entertaining for your day to day, so I thoroughly enjoy it. I will always pop on the charities. I'll like ignore my volunteers, and I'm like, no, I'll look at Catrin's. It's fine. No, so even kind of what you had mentioned too is like wanting to be sort of within building that physical representation of something that you weren't seeing, so you could have somebody that other people could then, as you paying it forward, other people could then really look towards you to see different ways of showing scars and living life with sort of different physical differences. Kind of what would you suggest to other young people that would be at that crossroads and wanting to become more body positive for themselves or show what's physically different about them?
I think social media is a really great tool, but for some people, posting on social media can be a really big thing. And obviously it is a big thing. Like the first time I did it, I was terrified. So it is a huge thing. However, I think just going about your day-to-day life, taking that first step to show off a scar can be very scary. But, you know, the first time you do it, surround yourself with people you love. Do it on a day where maybe you're going around to a friend's house, or I think the first time I wore a t-shirt with like my arms on show, I just went over to my friends, we just had a glass of wine, and it wasn't a big deal, It wasn't a big event, but it made me feel good. And I walked in, my friend didn't mention it, not because it was taboo, but because she didn't see it as a big deal. And that made me go, oh right, okay, well maybe if I can do this, then I could go to the cinema with my arms on show and see how I feel there, somewhere that's still a bit more private. And the way I did it was I slowly built it up to then being in a bikini in Australia, running around the beach, you know? But I do think it's everything in life is a step-by-step process. And to do it all in one go can be scary for anything in life. So if you are someone that has a physical difference that makes you look different, starting off in a comfortable environment and then moving towards, you know, just walking down the street, going shopping, maybe with that on show, it can be like the stepping stones towards feeling more confident in yourself, and for other people to feel more confident to talk to you about it as well, which can always help in society generally with the taboo subjects and things.
Yeah, absolutely. And even kind of going off of what you said is that sort of for what we'll go off of in that direction is just sort of taking different steps and being able to surround yourself with people that are confident in who you are and that you feel you're most confident with when you're trying to show different elements of a physical difference or a disability. But then we'll always say on the other side is a lot of times you don't, for myself, if my health is physically impairing me quite a bit and I have to have adaptive equipment, or it's physically obvious if my neurovascular condition is at a peak point because my extremities, my hand and foot on the left side turn blue and they're swollen, and that's obviously, I have quite albino skin if any of you are watching, so naturally you will be able to see it right away. So it is just kind of knowing that your version of like normality looks different than to other people, and finding that you're moving on and continuing to live your life every day in its fullest, so that if other people are going to look, it's because they don't get to see it very often and you don't look like themselves. So that's where a lot of the unwanted stares and comments may come from, and you get to, like you said, educate people of what differences look like if you're out and about with family and friends.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember with people staring and things is generally it's not out of like hate, and it's not out of someone being horrible. Generally it's just out of curiosity because it's something different.
Yeah.
Anything that you see that is a striking color, or someone has pink hair, it's something that will catch your eye and it will make you quickly look and stare. So just to try and keep that in mind when you are walking down the street and you feel very exposed. That's something that's really helped me, is just to try and remind myself that it's curiosity rather than people being malicious.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we'll say with people that we have to use adaptive equipment like wheelchairs or canes or walking sticks, or even just sort of having partial limbs and they're using prosthetics, that it's actually the equipment piece that's more of an eye catcher, and it's not so much you, it's sort of the part that comes along with you. So like you had said, it's just that knee-jerk reaction for people to look, especially if you're younger, because even as of late, I even mentioned it to Catrin too, I've been using a cane walking for a lot of times and looking very young as I do at 25, and then having a cane, which most people are more elderly when they come over and we have matching canes now. For them, they tend to look only because it looks weird for them, for a young person with a cane. But when I point out that that's just sometimes something I need to use, they kind of see the confidence that I'll project with the medical accessories, and then they go like, oh, okay. And like, good on you for like still going about your day to day regardless. So that's what I always will suggest through the charity too, is even if you don't feel confident, sometimes projecting that confidence, then you get reciprocated back with a lot of more positive feelings because you're trying to project what you would want to be feeling in that moment.
A smile goes a very long way. That's what I've learned.
It does. It like boosts an endorphin, I hear. So that works for me. So we're going to end our Rebel Game Changer status, and we're going to go into a new fun segment we have with the InvisiYouth chat sessions, and this one's called So That One Time.
So that one time.
All right, guys, we've got a new segment with the InvisiYouth chat sessions that I think you guys are going to love. It is where we talk to guests who come from all different walks of life in different countries, and they have all direct connections to the chronic illness and disability community. And we always hear that the biggest way you guys get to learn from one another is hearing about your life stories. So we took that in mind when building this new segment we'll have all of our guests take part of. This is called So That One Time, where we get all of our guests to tell you a story about life with their health struggles that are either so damn funny or so ironic or empowering that it needs to be shared with all of you. So this is where I get to sit back and sip my water and have Catrin tell me some story time.
Right, so I've been trying to rack my brain for a funny story, but I feel like I'm not a naturally funny person. So I figured I'd give you an empowering one instead. Okay, so when I was in hospital, I had to relearn to walk and talk and everything you could possibly imagine. So for me, walking was a real big struggle, and it took a very, very long time. And even when I did start to walk, I still had to use AFOs, so like things in my shoes and frames and people holding onto me, and I could only do a few steps, etc. So I basically, when I was in hospital, was obviously not in a very good way, couldn't walk, was really struggling with motivation. And I think one of the hardest things for me with this long-term situation, it was probably 6 months in, I assumed, because you do assume with illness that you're going to get better. Yeah. You go to hospital, you get better. Yeah. And because I just was thrown into this hospital situation, I assumed that would happen and it would happen quickly. It did not. So I basically hit a point where I didn't see the point in trying. I did not see a point in giving it a go. I didn't see a point in life, you know? Yeah. And so it got to the stage where basically if I didn't start trying, that it was going to probably just stabilize and I would never walk again and I wouldn't ever be able to do certain things again. So one day my surgeon basically came in, and he'd already spoken to my parents and brought them into the room. He came in, my nurses came in, like it was basically, we had this massive group meeting.
Oh God.
Sat down, yeah, I know, terrified.
The intervention.
Sat down, and I thought they were going to be lovely and tell me how well I was doing and just, you know, to give me the sympathy card, blah, blah, blah. No, sat down, and my surgeon basically told me if I didn't try again, if I didn't try at all, I would never walk, I would never dance. He was like, do you think you want to play piano again? Well, that's not going to happen if you don't start doing your exercises. And it sounds horrible.
Yeah.
It sounds awful. But that was something that he knew would work for me because my personality trait, I need people to push and push. And that very, very same day, I not only took my first couple of steps on my own, because he basically triggered my mindset of, oh, well, if he's saying I can't do it, then I'm going to prove him wrong, which I think is what a lot of young people like
works.
to do what people tell them not to do. He triggered my mindset, and basically that day I not only took my first 2 or 3 steps on my own, I fell over afterwards, but it's not the point. But I'd been given an iPad in my hospital room, and I also had this glove which the stick would attach to so that I could prod the screen. And I went into my room, I asked one of the nurses to put my stick on so I could put some music on, and that was the first Instagram post that I posted that day. I took a selfie of myself. I was bald, I was in a questionable t-shirt with my pressure garments on and my bandages, and I took a selfie, got onto Instagram. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. It took me about an hour and a half to do.
That's like me as well.
But eventually I managed to get it on there, and all of these comments came flooding in. And I realized that all of the tough love that my surgeon had given me, and the tough love that I thought he was being an awful doctor and that he was ruining my life and everything he said was the most awful thing in the world, it was something that I actually needed at that point. And since then, I've actually come across many hurdles where I felt like I didn't want to continue and I didn't want to try and I wasn't motivated. And I do think motivation is something that's very, very difficult to muster up yourself.
Yes.
And on those days, my parents have learned from my surgeon. And those days, they come in and they literally, they're not horrible, but they will give me that tough love. And for me as an ill person, sometimes I need that. And I need people to not tiptoe around me. And I've learned that generally the people that are the hardest on you are going to be the people that want you to succeed the most. So it's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. I will also say, for the end of this story, just to make it a little bit funny, I made a deal with my doctor when I left hospital that if I didn't cry during one of his procedures, that he'd buy me a Subway sandwich. And
I would have asked for something a little bit more, Catrin.
I didn't realise that the odds were so high. But I didn't cry, so I got 2 Subway sandwiches the day I left hospital. So, but yeah, my doctor was amazing. He knew that at that point I needed someone to give me, in Britain we say a kick up the arse.
We say that in America too.
Great. So I needed that at that point. So just knowing that the people around you that can sometimes be a bit hard on you, and it might seem that like people are giving you a bit of a hard time, that it comes from a place of love. And that is something that I've learned, and I know that I put into place sometimes with people that I'll go meet. Not in an awful way, just to say to people sometimes, to give them a shake and be like, you have to do this because you won't get to do this again. And make those realizations for the other person. That's a really big deal. And to be told that I wouldn't be able to dance again, that was probably the big one that I was like, well, I'm going to prove you completely wrong. And I've danced again. So, I think it was a big benefit to me. And one of the things that's always stuck in my mind about my doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, even just thinking of that's my 2 physical therapists that I had through pretty much the 6 or 7 years on and off that I was in PT. They had what they called the good cop, bad cop routine that they would occasionally switch, but it was usually my one physiotherapist was the bad cop and would push me and would let me cry when things were too hard and would have me restart everything if I tried to curb around a corner. And my other one was very much the good cop, that the second I looked uncomfortable, he would have to walk away. He couldn't watch me in pain. He would let me take breaks all the time, but the 2 of them together is what really worked the best for me. It's because, like you said, they really would take that direct note that I needed sometimes when I was just too physically exhausted and emotionally exhausted to keep going for 2 or 3 hours every single day for more and more physical therapy, especially when you know what you're physically going to be walking into. That definitely having that sort of, as you said, a kick in the ass is definitely very helpful a lot of times. That's what I said when we built InvisiYouth, that I wanted to make sure it had a sarcastic tone, because that sort of this little sharp edge of sarcastic humor, the dry, as I say, all my British supporters are my favorites because you guys get our dry sarcasm very quickly.
Sarcasm.
Love the sarcasm. I love that. So after going through a little bit of story time with Catrin, now that's where we're going to be able to go back into the show a bit more, and now we know she's an expert on all things life. So we are going to go into building a toolkit with you guys in What's Your Life playlist.
What's your life playlist? What's your life playlist?
All right, with What's Your Life playlist, this is where we get to chat with our guests about some of the music, apps, podcast shows, tools, and motivation that they would add to their ultimate life playlist. Things that have been helpful for them in their day-to-day and ultimate life hacks. So this is where we would say either get out your pen and pencil or your note-taking app on your phone, whichever you prefer, and you can go through and take some different notes on things that Catrin has really found would be the ultimate playlist to life for her. So now we know that you are a motivational speaker and body positivity expert to the world. So what have been some of your favorite body positivity people, either on Instagram or motivational speakers that you've actually looked up to as well?
So, I mean, I follow so many people on Instagram. I was scrolling through my feed earlier and I was like, God, I've got so many to choose from. I mean, other burn survivors for me are a big thing, because you'll know, like, as much as it's lovely to find a community of loads of people that got all different illnesses, sometimes it's nice to find someone that does completely understand you.
Yeah.
So I do follow a lot of burn survivors. There's a girl in Australia called Churia Pitt. She's amazing. She like runs Ironmans. She has, I think, like her hands got quite badly injured, so she uses loads of adaptive equipment for putting on necklaces and bracelets and things, and she's just like, all her posts are so motivational. If you think I'm motivational, honestly, go and follow Churia. She's so cool. And then, I mean, in terms of just general body positivity, there's a girl called Iskra Lawrence, who is a model. She went through from basically being a model and having real issues with eating disorders, and then realized that her health wasn't okay, that she needed to sort herself out. And I know that she has like some kind of circulation disorders as well. And she now is like a body positive model. She bears her body, like, no matter what size people say she should be, she is the size that she wants to be. And she's just, again, super motivational. And another person who's visibly different that is really great, not just on social media, but generally in the world now, is Winnie Harlow.
Yes.
So she has vitiligo, and she is, again, amazing in terms of trying to just get people to see something different. Obviously, I know Winnie still fits that stereotypical idea of what a model looks like in terms of her height and her weight and her body type. But, I mean, to ease people in, what better way to do it than to have all of those aspects, but then change, you know, the way she looks in terms of her skin and having that visible difference. So yeah, those three are probably the three that inspire me most. And then I follow loads of blogs that are just motivational quotes, happy dogs, you know, all those.
Happy dogs. I love
all
it.
things you need.
I love that. What about for you, that have been some like tools or trends that have helped you stay in check with your physical health? Because obviously, being a university student, sometimes that can take a bit of the back burner. So what have been helpful for you in that?
So one of the things I actually started doing years ago, as in after my accident, but 4 years ago maybe, was tracking. It sounds, not that I've got obsessed or anything, but I track my exercise and I track how much water I drink, and I use something called MyFitnessPal.
Okay.
This is another app, glued to technology. MyFitnessPal has been really beneficial to me. So when I moved on from physiotherapy to not really having much input, I realized that I had to take control of my physical abilities. And the best way to do that was to go to the gym. And so by sort of keeping track of that side of things and making sure that I'm going and working out, 2-3 times a week, I don't beat myself up about it if I don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But by keeping a check on myself, I know that it will make sure that my health's okay. It'll make sure that my skin is stretched, which is something really important for anyone with scarring. I know that it makes me feel better, and that helps de-stress me. And then my water intake is a massive thing for like hydration for my skin. So my fitness pal sort of does that all for me.
Oh,
So
cool.
one of the biggest tools has been that, I guess, in terms of organizing my life aside from university.
No, even going off of that, especially like you had mentioned, when you're not sort of constantly having to be at a doctor and it's sort of your new normal, it's hard to, because you don't have people keeping you in check with a schedule of showing up. So even I have an LG phone and they have an app built in. It's called LG Health, and they take different stats on you, and it sort of pings your location every few minutes and counts how many steps you've taken or what kind of elevation you're on. So that's been great, even just on my LG phone that I have, that I'll get little notifications on random days going, you've taken 742 extra steps this Tuesday than last Tuesday. And like a bunch of confetti just goes off on my phone, which is really, really just makes me want to walk more steps at that point, just so I can see the confetti sort of glitter all over my phone. So that is, like you had mentioned too, something that keeps you accountable. And like my app will pop up onto my phone to remind me if I've actually taken less steps during a week, so that I can sort of try and remind myself to be more active, because with nerve damage you have to remain more physically active and keep that in check, because you don't want to have atrophy or more nerve pain pop in. So you have to kind of keep that in check as well. So like you said, it is a good tool to keep you accountable for a lot of what you do.
Yeah, anything that makes you take back control, it's good for your health, but it's also just good for your like self-esteem, and to make you feel better in yourself, and that you have a bit more control over something in life, because you'll know like you don't have control over other things. So taking that bit of control can be really good for you.
Yeah. What about like a top playlist? Either like you had mentioned, Happy Dogs is a place where you get some sort of like motivation, but what are sort of either like music playlists or artists or accounts that you have where there's like a lot of motivational quotes that for you would be ideal?
So in terms of music and playlists, I've got such an eclectic music taste. Like I like opera, I like musical theatre, I like rock. So it's massive. The things I like to listen to. So when I was in hospital, my parents made me a playlist, and it was literally anything you could think of. Musical theatre, like classical piano, rock and roll. So for me, that particular playlist they made me is always something I'll put on if I want to just feel good, because I know that other people made that for me.
Yeah.
Other things that really, in terms of music's a really big thing in my life. I sing, and I just love listening to it. So the other thing that I really love listening to is anything that my mum and dad listen to in terms of in the house, because my mum is really into Queen, Fleetwood Mac, Led Zeppelin, like all the greats, and I love just sitting and listening to it because it makes me feel good and it makes me feel happy. So yeah, I think nostalgia is a lovely thing. So anything that sort of gives you those nice feelings can make you feel good. Also, when I'm feeling rubbish, I love sad music. That sounds so counterproductive.
I want to wallow.
I do. Sometimes I love having like an hour's wallow.
I love it. That's the same
I'll
way.
feel better if I do it. So I've got like, I love Codaline, if you know Codaline, this band, bit of Adele,
Oh,
throw on all
get
those
it.
ballads, and sometimes you just need a good cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you need all these playlists for all these different things, and yeah, it can make a big difference. So music can be amazing.
Oh, no, absolutely. I was even going to like casually mention that too, because our whole entire Twitter feed has been flooded with Little Mix's new album, LM5, because of
Yeah.
constantly with their sort of body confidence motivation. So kind of getting getting them a major shout out through a lot of the young women with physical difference. And I know even the YouTuber Hannah Witten was in their music video, so we've seen quite a bit of her popping up, and she is an Asti, so we've been able to kind of see that chronic illness community get represented in mainstream media. But like you said, sometimes if you just want to wallow, it's good to like sit in the sadness for a little, not like multiple days, but give yourself the hour. I'll always say, some people say 5 minutes. I need more than 5 minutes. I'm too much of an emotion person. So give myself an hour, and when that timer goes off, I'm like, all right, you have to check yourself, and then we're good. But Adele is good. Adele's good to feel the
whole
feels.
idea. It's back to that whole idea of it's okay not to be okay.
Exactly.
Take that hour. It's okay not to be okay, and then get back to it and get your stuff done. You know.
I know. And Adele lets you feel every feel. You know, so you have to be able to listen to her. So now that we've got some of our life playlist put together, we're going to go into our final segment with Catrin, and this one is called In an Ideal World. In our last segment, In an Ideal World, we often talk about wanting to improve society and change stigmas and make the world more inclusive, and that's obviously a massive boulder to push up any mountain. But what we don't get to talk about is how we make things in an ideal world. So with our guests, we're going to talk about things that they would really want to see in general society for the illness and disability community, and especially with the body positivity comment and mentality of building that for lots of young people, and then ways that you can sort of build that community for yourself. So on a general statement just off of this, what would you want sort of like as an ideal way for people to respond to physical difference?
I mean, in an ideal world, there wouldn't really be a response, you know? There wouldn't be a response because it wouldn't be seen as a difference. Mm-hmm. In reality, like, everyone's human, everything is always different, so I know that isn't going to happen. For me, a realistic ideal world, it would be just for it not to be shock, for it not to be that assumption of, you know, that you are unhappy. It would be that it wouldn't be seen as something bad. Like, that is all I want, really. Yeah. Obviously, I've been through something bad, but the people that respond to me haven't, and they shouldn't assume that that bad thing is something that I'm still living in, you know? Yeah. Especially with any kind of complete life-altering thing where it's happened sort of midway through your life. Mm-hmm. Often it can happen and you can put it to the side after working through it, therapy, like becoming comfortable with yourself. And for other people to just know that not everyone will still be in that place, and to not assume that you will be. So I think for me, I guess that would be the best thing in terms of like the reaction to the scarring. I don't know, like, I'd like to see scars seen on a female similar to how scars are seen on a male, because I do think that the stereotypes of scarring on men is seen in a very different way to on women. I think for women it's seen as something that is weak, and it can be seen as something that has been something traumatic and awful. And sometimes with men, it can be seen as bravery, and it can be seen as something to be proud of. So I'd like to see sort of, it's like female equality, you know, it's the same kind of thing. I'd love to see that quality of what scars represent and what a body difference represents, because I'm just as brave as a man with the same scarring, but I wouldn't have that reaction, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even kind of going off of that, is that a lot to do with wanting more representation in like media and campaigns, that if it's seen more often of being hired inclusively and visually in film and TV, that there would be less of a sort of jarring response because it's more common in somebody's subconscious?
Yeah, completely. And I think one of the hard things is the way to sort of integrate visible differences or disability or invisible differences into media is a difficult one, because people think that, say I got hired to go on a TV show, realistically they'd make me the lead because I look so starkly different. But what we need to see is people in the background just going about their daily lives, walking down the road with a scar, or going down the road in a wheelchair, or going down the road using a cane and they're not 80, you know?
Yeah.
So seeing that in media in terms of like filming and television would be amazing, just to have it there. I always think it when I watch soap operas. I just love to see someone walking down the street that had like half an arm or had scars all down their face, and it not be seen as a villain, it not be seen as like the main part, and it's all about that person having that disability or that visible difference. So
Yeah.
trying to integrate it in that way. And obviously in the beauty industry, as I've already said, it would just be nice to see it be inclusive all around and not just with those few particular brands.
Yeah, and even kind of going off of that too, what really for you, because you had mentioned it too, like in an ideal setting, that a lot of people say, oh, we just need to remove stigmas and be more inclusive, and like you said, have background actors and extras that sort of show that inclusivity, but ideally that there's a process to get to that point of sort of removing stigma and misconception, especially with sort of the body confidence realm. So what would you really suggest to young people that are trying to kind of hone in on their own body confidence, whether it's with a disability or an illness they've been born with, or similar to you and myself, where there was sort of a traumatic injury or an event that shifted their health and physical difference?
I mean, I think one of the main things to say to young people is that you have to feel comfortable and confident in yourself before trying to take on the world.
Yeah.
And I do think that's something that can be very difficult, especially nowadays, because people will just be like, oh, you should set up a blog, like after something like this happens, or you should set up an Instagram and it should be like really positive and motivational, and oh, it'd be amazing, and then you could become an influencer, you know. And it's all very well saying that, but if you don't feel comfortable within yourself, it can be very hard to do that, and it can be very hard to sort of bare your soul to the world when you can't even bare your soul to yourself.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things is trying to become comfortable and confident just in like your day-to-day life before maybe throwing it out to the world and challenging people. Because if you go and challenge people and throw it out to the world and you get that negative response, it could take you like 10 steps back.
Yeah.
So, you know, to know that you should be proud of what you've come through, you know, you face probably more than anyone looking at a social media account has, or, you know, like knowing all of that before embarking on trying to help break those stigmas, it can make a big difference to your own health, I think. And I certainly had to do that. Like, I had to be comfortable going around with my scars on show before I started, you know, posing in my underwear on Instagram. Not something I do often, but definitely has occurred. But yeah, I had to feel really good in myself to do that first. And then the responses, where I did get a couple of negative responses, it was like water off a duck's back. And it was something that I could deal with because I knew how awesome I was, because I taught myself to feel like that, you know?
Yeah, and even kind of going off of that too, I think a big suggestion we'll give to people is that like if you're trying to move towards feeling confident in sort of your physical difference, whether that's chronic illness or disability or injury, that it doesn't mean if you have a day where you just don't feel confident at all, that sort of all the days previously where you felt confident just sort of get erased and it's null and void. It's not that you have to kind of start over, that you can have good days and bad days, but that still means you're working towards being fully confident in your skin, in what you have as sort of a health struggle. Because I'll always even say, even now 10 years after my injury, I still have like, there's like 80% of the year where I'm like fully confident in what my body looks like and what my body can do medically. But there are 20% of the year where there are days where I'm not feeling myself, I'm not feeling anyone else looking at me, but that's okay, knowing that confidence, having an unconfident day doesn't mean that all of your confident days before don't count any longer.
And to remember that every single person in the world, whether they have a health condition or not, will have days like that.
Yes.
And knowing that you're not on your own, I think will make a huge difference.
Yeah, and even kind of going off of that too, like we said, we're working towards that ideal world, but there's a realistic ideal world. How would you suggest young people respond if they're taking those steps, but they do get negative response from people, that sort of ignorance from general outsiders? Usually it's not family and friends.
So I do think that this is a really hard question.
Yeah.
Because, you can have 1,000 positive comments and one negative, and generally you'll always focus on the negative.
Yeah.
It's human nature, unfortunately. I mean, in terms of response, like making sure that you've got that good network of friends, family, support network, whatever that might be, making sure that you've got that around you, and that, I mean, it sounds silly, but whenever I post something that might cause a bit of controversy, or I do something that maybe is a little out there, I always make sure that I've told my best friends, or if I'm going out for a night out with my friends and I wear something like a dress that shows off my scars, because that's often when I'll get comments, is when people are drunk and had too much to drink and they lose inhibitions. And so my friends know when we go out that they have to have my back.
Yeah.
And obviously they would, but I just give them a little bit of a heads up by being like, oh, I'm going to wear a dress tonight, like this dress, what do you think? And they're just like, right, yeah, you should, obviously you look amazing, like wear it. And when we're out, I know that they're going to be there for me if something were to happen. So, I mean, surrounding yourself with people, finding that confidence, inner confidence where you can. If you don't have that inner confidence, try not to react angrily, because again, ignorance is generally because of someone's uneducation.
Yeah.
So try and maybe like use that moment to sort of take a breath. If it's something about why you're doing something, or what the, you know, what is that for, maybe just quickly, you know, it's because of this, I don't really want to talk about it, I'm gonna go, you know.
Yeah.
So it's as simple as that. And then go home, and if you need to get upset, get angry, then turn to that support network, which I think is always at the core of everything when you're going through health struggles, is having people there for you.
Yeah, and I even love that you said that. It's sort of building your own armor that you can sort of go out into the world with, which I think is really helpful, is having those friends there that are aware if you're going to do social media or blogging in activism, them knowing about more vulnerable posts that you might be making, so that they're sort of ready to kind of be there for you if you do get some of those negative comments. And then if you are out, having people being aware too. I think that's really sort of a good piece of advice. And similarly to what you said too, ignorance is where most people will make their comments. I've had quite a few over the decade, and it's more of, you kind of will trust your instinct. There are moments where I will just ignore people if they're walking past and making a statement. But if it is that we're sort of stuck in an environment, I always say nothing has made me feel more empowered by calling out somebody's ignorance and sort of explaining to them why what they said was insulting. And then 99% of the time, people will then start to sort of back up and either try and dig themselves out of the grave they just built for themselves, or just sort of stop and walk away because they realize what they said is something that actually would be an offensive comment. So I always say that nothing's more empowering if you sort of challenge somebody's ignorance at times, but you have to sort of feel that confidence in yourself, even if you're not confident in your health, sort of feeling confident in standing up for yourself against other people, especially sort of general strangers.
Yeah, and sometimes like putting that mask on, like we were talking about earlier, putting that mask of confidence and that armor of confidence on just in certain situations can be a big benefit to you. And then when you're in your safe space with your, you know, safe group of people, that's when that can come off. And if you need to vent, or if you need to cry, or if you need to, I personally like will just rant about it until someone's like, right, shush now. Yeah, we know it's upset you. Shush, let's move on from it.
Yeah.
It can be a big thing. So that mask, knowing when to put it on and take it off.
Yeah, and kind of ending sort of this segment, ending the episode, what for you would be sort of tips if young people want to kind of get involved in that activism, especially with body positivity? What would be some tips for them to kind of take those steps into activism?
So in terms of myself, the way I got into it originally, the motivational speaking was how my activism began, actually, rather than social media. So I worked with lots of charities here in the UK. Some were just burns, some were anyone with visible differences. I also worked with some vision charities. So I began speaking on a voluntary basis, and someone told me I was quite good at it, and that maybe I should start doing it more often. Yeah, so I began doing that. And that was where I realized that my story and the way I looked and the way I presented myself, that it was having this positive impact, because I'd meet people and they'd say how much of a difference my talk made, or they'd say how much of a difference it was me walking in with a short sleeve top on.
Yeah.
And so getting involved in charities can often be a really good way of finding your way in and what you're comfortable with, and you get to meet other people that are doing similar things and see if that's something you'd be interested in. And then from there, my social media kind of grew from being just for my friends and me going, out for food and posting pictures of my sandwich to being actual relevant things and talking about my struggles, my body positivity, showing my scars. And I actually always say to my friends now, I'm like, my Instagram is not for you guys anymore. I was like, you can look at it if you want, but I was like, I'm going to be posting at 5 p.m. most days, and it's going to be motivational quotes, it's going to be motivational posts, and it's going to be me trying to make people feel good.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that's fine. You kind of make us feel good too. So I was like, great, works out lovely. But yeah, like, I do think charities are always a great way to start and get a little bit of advice, and then sort of using social media to whatever comfortableness that you want to use it to. Even if that is putting up a motivational quote and putting a little comment underneath it saying my mood today, it can be a way of being active on social media and showing people what you're going through without sort of directly saying this is what I'm going through right now,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's lots of different ways, and we now live in a great society where technology allows that, and you can reach people all the way across the world. Like, we're speaking, I'm in Britain, you're in America. Like, we live in a great time where there are so many different opportunities that you can do. So sort of exploring and looking at other people in your similar situation can sort of give you an idea of what to do next, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially sort of shameless plug on being a charity. We always love volunteers and people following us on social media. So clearly, like Catrin had mentioned, we got the luxury of being able to meet when I've gotten to work in England physically, but then we get to work sort of virtually as well. So having that, like you said, sort of finding charities, finding motivational speakers or advocates that are currently out there, and then really showing that virtual support, and then volunteering and being able to do that's a really big sort of taking different steps, because some people like being a little more behind the camera, but they still get to be activists working. We have dozens and dozens of volunteers that live with chronic illness and disability, but they have general Instagrams and they follow us, but it's just them with their friends at university and going out, like you said, all of their really fancy food that they eat. But it's never about activism, but they do so much behind the scenes of promoting us on social media and finding other brands or grants that we can apply for so we can fund all of these programs and events for people internationally. So they do a lot behind the scenes. So that's where they get to make an impact, is without even being publicly noticed. And then a lot of other people like myself and like Catrin, they get to take more of a public seat in charities anywhere across the board. Mine, obviously, having InvisiYouth is inclusive to all illnesses and disabilities and physical and mental health, but then there are that are illness specific too, or age group specific, that are very much sort of within your network. So being able to really do your research is always really important, and that sort of will be able to guide you in the type of activism that you like to do the most.
Yeah, and also to know that if you're not the kind of person that wants to stand in the front, doesn't mean that you're doing any less work. Yeah. I'm a very confident person. I always have been. So my accident didn't change that. So I'm just very lucky that I didn't lose that part of my personality, and then I was able to channel it in this way. But the work that people do behind the scenes is often actually even more more beneficial. So to know that, just because you're not happy to share on Instagram or to show off about like what you're going through doesn't mean that it's any less important and that you're doing any less work than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a great way of ending the episode, and I want to thank Catrin for being on the show. And since we talked about your Instagram being so fantastic and badass, I want everyone to know where they can find you on social media so they can follow you. So what are your handles all over social media?
So my name's quite hard to spell. It's my full name. So it's at Catrin Pugh, which is CatrinPugh. It's very Welsh. Apologies. But yeah, so that's me all over social media. And yeah, I try and post when I can. Like, I'm not a proper influencer. I don't get photographers to take pictures of me. But
Your photos are fantastic, though.
I love doing it. So for me, it's fun. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Cool. And then you guys all know you can find InvisiYouth Charity on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at InvisiYouth. And you can find the InvisiYouth chat sessions on our YouTube channel and on our podcast channels like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. And make sure you subscribe, give a thumbs up, 5 stars. It definitely helps us keep doing what we're doing. So I want to thank Catrin again for being our guest on this episode. And we will get to see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.